have a few questions now to ask Tony about his own background and how it relates to the Biosphere project. Tony, can you give us a little bit of an idea about examples from your own family history which illustrate an interest in innovation and technology?
Yeah. My father is an aerospace engineer. He started his engineering career after the Second World War. He was a pilot in the Second World War. And after the war ended, he went to U of T and studied aerospace engineering, got 2 degrees, and worked on a fairly significant project after that, which was the Avro Aero, which, by the way, is illustrated or modeled here. Some people will recognize this. This aircraft is a part of Canadian history. It was the first, I believe, Mach 2 jet fighter that was ever designed or developed in the 50s. My father was in charge of the functional specification for the airframe on that aircraft. He was with Air Force headquarters at that time. He was a squadron leader. After that project was canceled in '59, we were transferred down to the States, and we lived outside of Washington, D.C. in Bethesda, Maryland, where we lived, and my father worked part-time as military attaché with procurement of technology for the Canadian military through the U.S. Military, and he worked part-time in the Pentagon too at that time. That was in the early 60s, and significant, especially to that time period, during the Kennedy administration, was the Cuban Missile Crisis,
Yes.
which I remember very distinctly, even though I was very young. I was like 5, 6 years old. What I remember from that is that many of our friends were getting bomb shelters put in their basements, and most cities had shelters designated in certain buildings where they had a large basement that could be used as a shelter. That's a part of the past that I guess we all experienced. It was closer to me to some extent as a Canadian who was stationed in the States during that period. Yeah.
And I think it was interesting with the Avro Aero as well, that it was a project that in many ways was ahead of its time.
Yeah.
And some of the design elements that were incorporated there were far in advance of what was being built. You mentioned the Mach 2 design at that time.
Yeah.
And in some ways, I think the Biosphere project, which we talked about earlier, is an example of something where you're thinking ahead of your own time.
Yeah. I guess the reason I was so motivated to work on the design at this stage is because I knew it would take a lot of time to finish the design in detail and build it, at least 10, maybe 15 years. So I wanted to initiate the process, and if world events indicated that it would be necessary, there would be some work that had already been done to lead the process of, in building this so-called Noah's Ark, building it with some references, some guidelines, so that people would believe to some extent that it would be possible to build if circumstances said that it was necessary to build.
Yes.